We're going to open the Word up this morning. How about we go to Mark chapter 9? Mark chapter 9. Verse 14. We might just for time's sake, we'll go to 22. This morning I'm talking about the process of God's order. The process of God's order. What is God's order for us? We need to understand first of all and foremost that sickness was never in the will of God. Never in the will of God. Many say there's different formulas. They think, we've got to do this. We have to lay hands on them. We have to anoint them with oil. We've got to spit in their eyes. We've got to do all this sort of stuff. But there's no formula to the way God works. God works in very different ways. And what we need to be is open to how God's going to work with His will. He may do it. He may wait. How He does it, when He does it, if He chooses to do it, it does not diminish that sickness was not in the will of God. There's different ways. If we look through the Scriptures and you study the Scriptures, you'll see there's ways that people have received their healing. First of all, there's your faith. Your faith. God uses your faith. There's a story in the Bible that there's this lady who had an issue of blood for 12 years. And she said, if I could only touch the hem of Jesus' garment. We know, we talk about the hem has got the tassels, the wings. It's called the wings and the hems, and there's healing in His wings. And they knew all the Hebrew stuff behind it. But she said, if I could just touch the hem of His garment, I will be well. She had faith there to come up beside Him, behind Him, being unclean, which was against the law to touch anyone, even to go in that vicinity. But she came up and she touched Him in the crowd. And power flew out. That power is dunamis. It comes from explosive power came out of Him. It's the same as in Pentecost. Power, dunamis power. Who loves dunamis power? It's not implosive, but explosive. And it come out of Him and He said, who touched me? Because He felt the power flee from Him. People drawed upon Him and the power went out. And He said, who touched me? Oh, come on, Lord, everyone's touching the crowd. No, I felt power, dunamis, come out of me. And she came up. And she was healed because of her faith. God used her faith. There was a centurion one time that come up and said, my servant is not well. If you would just speak the word, he will be healed. Jesus said, I'll come. He said, no, don't come. I'm one under authority. I know how authority works. Now listen to that. I know how authority works. You just speak the word and it will be done. He had faith in the word that he could just speak it and it'd be done. You see, God uses your faith. We're going to a story here in Mark chapter 29, and if we look here in verse 22, it talks about there was a boy with an evil spirit brought to the disciples, and they couldn't cast the demon out. Then 21, Jesus says, he asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered. It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. Jesus said, if you can? Are you serious? If I can? If you can, Jesus said, everything is possible for him who believes. You see, so there's a faith thing right there. Immediately, the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe, but help me to overcome my unbelief. How many times do we pray and we have faith to pray, and then there's this little bit of unbelief? Oh, we've got to press in, but there's unbelief. God, you just sing out, Lord, help me, my unbelief. I believe, just meet me there. And God met him there and healed the boy because he met him in his faith, where his faith was. You see, it's not about you, it's about Jesus in you. It's not about your faith, it's his faith in you that does the work. But he meets you where your faith is. And he uses faith for healing and for all sorts of stuff that you're waiting for. It goes on, there was a mother with a girl, a Phoenician woman. She had a daughter who was demon possessed. And she came to Jesus and fell at his feet and kneeled and said, "Please help my daughter." And he turned around and he said, "I don't give the crumbs to the dogs, to feed the dogs." She said, "But the crumbs fall off the table." He was having to go at her to see what she would do. And she said, "Yes, but I could at least eat the crumbs." And he said, "Go, your daughter's well." Her faith was to come and receive from Jesus. Just come. And his word went and she was healed that hour. There was faith involved with her coming to Jesus. And we see there that Jesus not only uses your faith, but he uses other people's faith. That girl, that demon-possessed girl, did not come to Jesus. Her mother came to Jesus. Through another person, Jesus healed them. Intercession for other people is so important. There was a time in the Bible that there was a man who was crippled on a mat. And his friends carried him on the mat to Jesus. Their faith. Couldn't get in, put him on the roof, dug a hole in the roof, lowered him down on the roof, and he said, "Your sins are forgiven. Get up and take your mat." The faith of his friends coming forth. Doesn't talk about the man's faith, but these guys were coming to Jesus to have him well. You see, Jesus uses the faith of others. He uses your faith where you are, but he also uses the faith of others. A matter of fact, in Matthew chapter 17, verse 20, the same story that we just read, that puts a different slant on it. Because at the end of Mark chapter 4, in Mark chapter 9 there, he says to his disciples, they ask him, "How come we could not cast it out?" And he says, "This kind comes out only by prayer." And then some manuscripts say prayer and fasting. That's how this one comes out. In other words, guys, you're not praying and you're not fasting enough. You're not doing it. You're not in the presence. And if we want to get out there, we want to be people that are very effective for the kingdom. We need to be people of prayer. We need to be people of the word. We need to be fasting. And we need to be going out and doing the will of God. And so we see here in Matthew chapter 17, verse 20, he says, "Because you have little faith." He said, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, "Move from here to here," and it will move. Nothing is impossible for you. Does Jesus lie? So when he says nothing is impossible for you, what's impossible? Nothing. Except we think everything's impossible for us, so that's where our faith is, and that's why we get nothing. We need to step up in faith and believe the words that Jesus said if we have the faith of a mustard seed, God will meet you in that faith, and nothing will be impossible for you to come. There's a process of God's order here. We just need to understand it. Then there's times that there's no faith required at all. Isn't that cool? Lazarus, dead in the grave. Come on. The sisters come and they say, they send word, "Jesus, your best friend Lazarus, he's died." And what's Jesus do? "Great, mate, stays for another 3 days." Doesn't go there, right? And the disciples are there going, "Oh, if we go back there, we're all going to get killed." Thomas, the one who we all knock and say he's a doubter, he's the one who says, "Let's go back and die with Jesus," right? So he's a good man. 3 days, they come back. And she's crying, and then they're saying, "If you're only here earlier," all faith was lost. They thought that's the end. "We don't roll the stone away. He stinks, God. He stinks, Lord." All faith was gone. And what did he do? "Father, I do this for them." Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus came forth. He was raised from the dead, not because of faith, because of grace. And also because of a witness to others and to the disciples. See, it was also like a type of Christ. Christ being in the grave 3 days and rising from the dead. When God says, "Enough, come forth." Amen. Come on. You see, in the Hebrew times, they would believe that a spirit would hover around the body for 3 days, and you weren't dead until after 3 days. After 3 days, there's no coming back. That was their belief. So Jesus was saying, "Well, we'll just wait for 3 days." and then I'll just raise him from the dead, and then no one can say a thing. And what do you think he's in the grave? 3 days. Same reason. He's dead. He's not coming back. Well, hello, come on back. No faith required. God can do good things for you. It's just out of compassion and out of love. Sometimes it's just by faith of obedience. Just by being obedient. You may not have a lot of faith, but you'll say, well, Lord, if that's what you say, I really don't think it'll work, but I'll do it because you asked me to. We have a look in the Word. It talks about that Jesus was at this temple, the synagogue, and they're all having a go at him, and he sees this man who's got a shriveled hand. Remember the story? And he's sitting there, and Jesus says to him, stretch out your hand. He didn't know he was going there for healing. He was just going to church, right? And Jesus says, stretch out your hand. Now, he could have put his weak one out, but he put the bad one out. Because God's attracted to weakness, not strength, right? So he puts out the weak hand and God heals him by obedience to God. God can do great things through you in any way. There was a lady who was another time on the Sabbath who was bent over for 18 years. And she was bent over and Jesus touched her and she stood up by obedience. And she was healed instantly. There was another time that Jesus was at the Bethsaida, and he's there, and there's a cripple there, 38 years. We've been to the site, 38 years getting down, and steps going down. He's there, and he says, "I cannot get in. Everyone gets in my way. Whinge, complain, blame others." But he didn't have faith in that way. Jesus come to him and he says, "Do you want to be well?" "Yeah." "Well, get up, take your mat and walk." So what's he do? He gets up and has a go. And as he does, he gets healed by obedience.